Hi, everyone. Apologies for the delay, just some technical issues. Thank you very much for joining and welcome to GCE-US Action Week Part 2. On Tuesday, we had some really insightful perspectives on intersectionality, how different factors affect education, and today we'll be focusing on solutions to those issues that we raised and programs in education tackling intersectional issues. So the theme for today is action-oriented initiatives and solutions. And our hashtag on social media today is Our Education, Our Future. So I'm excited to hear all the youth-led and youth and students-focused work going on and to continue to see how youth and students are exemplifying resilience and solutions to lived realities. So very briefly, some housekeeping. There is interpretation available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, and as you can see, sign language interpretation as well. Please do send questions and comments all throughout the meeting through the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to our wonderful moderators for today, Diana and Lucia, to take us through the session. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Vicky, and good morning from here to everyone. It's so nice to see you here all again. So right now we're going to go through a conversation, and for that we're going to talk about the youth efforts to compensate for the learning loss for students in Talbiya, a camp for Palestinian refugees in Jordan. And for that, I'm so glad to present Rem Hamdan, who is a member of the Youth Network of the ARA Campaign for Education for All. And for that, I have the question, which is, if you can brief us on the education context of the Palestinian refugees in Jordan, and what are some of the youth efforts to compensate for learning loss for Palestinian refugees students in Jordan?
مساء الخير، يعطيكم العافية. أنا ريم حمدان من الأردن. راح أكون معكم وهتحدث عن قضية التعليم بسياق اللجوء الفلسطيني في الأردن. طيب، سياق التعليم للجوء الفلسطيني في الأردن ممكن نقسمه لمجموعة عناوين. من ضمنها أول عنوان اللي هي مقدم الخدمة. من هو المسؤول عن تقديم الخدمة في للاجئين الفلسطينيين في الأردن؟ أول مقدم للخدمة اللي هي وكالة الأمم المتحدة للإغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين الفلسطينيين. المقدم الآخر اللي هو الحكومة الأردنية. طبعا الحكومة الأردنية بتقدم الخدمة للاجئين الفلسطينيين اللي مش مصنفين بمخيمات لجوء، اللي هم موجودين بتجمعات للاجئين الفلسطينيين، يعني هم مش موجودين كمخيمات لجوء معترف بها في الأردن. أما وكالة الأمم المتحدة للإغاثة وتشغيل اللاجئين هي بتشتغل بمخيمات اللجوء، يعني مكان تقديم الخدمة بالتحديد هو مكان اللجوء، المخيم نفسه. بيئة التعليم، بدنا نحكي بنقطة ثانية متعلقة بسياق التعليم للاجئين الفلسطينيين، هي بيئة التعليم الخاصة باللجوء اللي هي وجود مكون آخر، بمعنى إنه في سياق تعليم معين للاجئين الفلسطينيين بيكون بمعزل عن باقي المكونات الأخرى في الأردن. فأنا كنت أشوف إنه هذا العزل.
Reem, sorry to interrupt you. You are in the English channel. Please switch to the Arabic channel so that we can hear you speaking in English.
Okay.
Please, can you change your channel to Arabic?
On the globe below, you'll choose your language and you'll stay on the Arabic channel so we can hear the interpreter. Okay?
Okay, اللغة العربية.
Yes, perfect. Okay.
حكينا عن البيئة التعليم الخاصة باللجوء، إنه وجود عدة مكونات مفصولة عن بعضها، اللي هي مكون الفلسطيني والمكون الأردني. هاي المكونات بتخلق هويتين مختلفات، وهاي الهويات تعمل على خلق حالة خاصة للتعليم في الأردن. فإحنا عندنا طالب في مخيمات اللجوء الفلسطيني بدرس لمرحلة معينة في مدرسة في مخيم لجوء فلسطيني، وبعدها بيضطر لأنه يكمل دراسته في مدرسة حكومية أردنية. فهاي النقلة ما بين السياق الفلسطيني واللجوء، وما بين انه دخل على مكون اخر اللي هو مكون الاردني. كمان لما نيجي نحكي عن انه شو هو الصعوبات اللي بيشوفها اللاجئ الفلسطيني في خلينا احكي المراحل الاساسيه اللي هي فهم الهويه الخاصه، صعوبه فهم الهويه الخاصه. وهي يعني انا بالنسبه لي كانت مشكله وعائق في تقدمي الاكاديمي، انه صعب تعرف حالك بالمرحله الاساسيه بالمدارس. انت شو لاجئ فلسطيني ولا فلسطيني ولا من الأردن؟ ففي صعوبة في تعريف الهوية. لما أجي أحكي عن المشاكل التعليم بالمطلق بالأزمات، سواء كانت الحروب أو اللجوء أو حتى كورونا، بحكي عن المشكلة الأولى اللي هي مشكلة الانقطاع عن التعليم بالمطلق. المشكلة الثانية اللي هي تضخم الفاقد التعليمي اللي هو موجود أصلا. يعني إحنا بنحكي عن وجود فاقد تعليمي في الدول كثير، بس الأزمات تضخم هذا الفاقد التعليمي. التداخلات في مصادر تقديم الخدمة. يعني أنا شفت في أزمة كورونا كان في كذا مصدر بيقدم خدمة التعليم، وهذا التداخل بيؤدي إلى صعوبة في تلقي هذه الخدمة. طبيعة تفاعلات الأهالي مع خليني أحكي الحلول المقترحة من الدول. يعني كيف الأهل تفاعلوا مع المنصات الإلكترونية أو مع المنصات التلفزيونية أو حتى مع المراسلات بين المدارس والطلاب. هاي التفاعلات كانت إلى حد ما ساهمت بهذا الحل، لا بالعكس أضرت فيه. طبيعة الحلول المتاحة زي ما حكيت، إيش هي الدول قدمت عشان تواجه هاي الأزمة. قدمت عندنا مثلا في الأردن قدم قناة تلفزيونية لبث الدروس للطلاب، المنصات الإلكترونية والواتساب. أنا بشوف في مخيم اللجوء بالتحديد كان الواتساب هو الوسيلة الوحيدة لتقديم خدمة التعليم. واعتمدت مدارس UN اعتمدت على المنصات اللي أنشأتها الحكومة الأردنية. فكان في مدرس بيقدم تعليمات تابع للUN، ومنصة أخرى تابعة للحكومة الأردنية، وكان في تداخل. لما أجي أحكي عن موضوع التدخلات الشبابية لتعويض الفاقد التعليمي في مخيم الطالبية بالتحديد، كان في عندنا قطاعين صراحة. القطاع الأول هو قطاع الخاص اللي هو هدفه ربحي، كان في مراكز خاصة تعنى بتقديم هذه الخدمة ولكن بمقابل مالي. القطاع الثاني اللي هو كان قطاع متاح أكثر، اللي هو المبادرات الشبابية لتعويض الفاقد التعليمي. أنا أحد مؤسسين مبادرة شبابية لتعويض الفاقد التعليمي تحت اسم شدة وسكون لعام 2021. هاي المبادرة كانت بتأسس لفكرتين. الفكرة الأولى اللي هي تعويض أهم المهارات التي فقدها الطالب في المرحلة الأساسية التي سبقت المرحلة التي هو فيها. والخدمة الثانية اللي كنا بنقدمها اللي هو تقديم برامج متعلقة ببناء مهارات مختلفة تفاعلية، لأنه مرحلة كورونا كانت مرحلة أكثر عزلة للطلاب خصوصا بأعمار جدا قليلة. فكان متطلب منا أنه نقدم مثل هذه البرامج عشان نخرطهم ونعطيهم مهارات أساسية. من ضمن البرامج اللي كنا نقدمها اللي هو برنامج عالم العلوم وبرنامج الشيف الصغير، يعني بتحاكي مجموعة مهارات حياتية يجب أن يتعلمها الطالب. بالنسبة لنا إحنا كتوصيات ممكن نشوفها بتحسين وضع التعليم للاجئين بالعموم واللاجئين الفلسطينيين على وجه الخصوص، اللي هي تحسين جودة التعليم للاجئين، أن يكون الدعم المقدم للاجئين في القضايا العامة مثل التعليم والصحة شامل للمجتمعات المستضيفة. لأنه المجتمعات المستضيفة بتشوف إنه في تمييز للاجئ الفلسطيني على حساب المجتمع المستضيف، فهذا الإشي مؤذي للاجئ أكثر من إنه هو مفيد له. كمان بشوف إنه تصويب المراكز القانونية للاجئين الفلسطينيين القادمين من سوريا، لأنه هاي عدم تصويب المراكز القانونية يعيق انتسابهم للمدارس، سواء كان لدى المفوضية السامية للاجئين أو لدى دائرة الشؤون الفلسطينية أو حتى لدى الحكومة الأردنية. فعدم وجود وثائق رسمية يعيق وجودهم في أو تلقيهم لخدمات التعليم. كمان بشوف إنه من المهم عمل برنامج عالمي شامل لتحسين أو لدعم الفاقد التعليمي ملزم للدول بمرحلتين. المرحلة الأولى هو تقديم حالة دراسة للوضع الحالي للدول في المدارس شاملة، والمرحلة الثانية هي قياس نتائج ما بعد عملية تصحيح الفاقد التعليمي. وأنا أرسلت رسمة ممكن هي بتعبر عن رسالة لوضع التعليم في مخيمات اللجوء الفلسطيني في الأردن. حشاركها معكم.
Thank you so much, Rim, for that information. We'll have definitely some comments at the end of the meeting. We'll have time for discussion, but thank you very much for sharing that. Now we'll go to our second discussion, which I'm glad to present our dear friends, Pierina, Anton, Lopez, and Katherine Loos. They are part of the Global Campaign for Education USA, and they are also co-authors of the report on financing education in emergencies. So right now we will talk with them about specifically education in emergencies. And I have a question for both, which is about you telling us more about why education in emergencies financing should be a priority, and also some of the findings of your report, please.
Thank you so much, Diana. Vicky, are you able to share the presentation? Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Vicky, for the invitation. So my name is Pierina. I am a student at Georgetown University studying global human development and a fellow at GCE-US. And I wanted to take the time to talk along with my colleague, Katie Loos, about a recent report that we co-wrote on the importance of financing education in emergencies. So if we could go to the next slide.
Great. So hi, everyone. My name's Katie Lewis. Let me know if you can hear me or have any trouble. But I am a student at Teachers College Columbia University and also a past GCE-US fellow. So the outline of our article, we had the opportunity to interview Esther Niemba, who is a student now in Ohio, and she was a refugee who came from Congo and then spent some time as a refugee as well in Uganda with her family, as her brother was seeking educational support for his partial blindness. So we interviewed her, and that kind of shaped the theme of our article, looking at both international support from the US in Uganda and Bangladesh, and also support for first generation students as they arrive in the United States. So we'll go through those stories and case studies, and then we'll look at some recommendations for each.
And just to give a brief overview about the publication itself. So this publication is part of a broader effort by an organization called First Focus on Children, which is an advocacy organization in the US that's dedicated to making children and families the priority in federal policy and US budget decisions. And traditionally, it's always been focused on US-based children and families. And this year, the first focus publication is shifting towards an international focus. So we were really excited, as part of the Global Campaign for Education, to be able to advocate for the importance of funding international education in emergencies. So starting off with our first case study, we started off looking at Uganda. And what we found is that in 2018, only 43% of the 616,000 school-aged refugee children and youth in Uganda were enrolled in formal education systems. And in response to that influx of refugee students, Uganda's Ministry of Education developed the Education Response Plan in order to ensure coordinated service delivery and education, because many of the refugee and migrant children and youth were living in some of the most underprivileged areas in Uganda, and therefore the delivery of education as a public service was facing a lot of challenges. And the Education Response Plan essentially came at a time when Uganda was really well positioned to bridge its humanitarian funding and its development funding, because it was part of the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, which was essentially a UN commitment to commit funding towards ongoing and immediate needs for humanitarian emergencies to kind of bridge the gap between the two sectors. And looking at the development of the Education Response Plan, at the time, the funding that was received for Uganda for humanitarian emergencies only covered less than 40% of what Uganda estimated as its need. And so in the makeup of the 2022 budget, analyzing the breakdown of education's as a share, the funding to education as a share of total humanitarian funding, we found that education actually makes up 14% of UNHCR's budget for Uganda, which surpasses the global goal of 10%, which is usually advocated by the Interagency Network for Education and Emergency, which is calling for humanitarian aid funding to allocate at least 10%. So Uganda is a really good example of a country that has addressed its response to refugee and humanitarian emergencies has included education and really prioritized education as the second most funded outcome. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a visual to show the makeup of UNHCR's budget in Uganda. And as you can see, education, we're happy to see, makes up a really important portion of UNHCR Uganda's budget. Next slide, please. Now we want to take a look at Bangladesh, and we totally understand that, these contexts are very, very different. And so we wanted to bring forward a case of a comparative analysis between two countries that are facing a similar challenge when it comes to financing education and emergencies, but have taken slightly different approaches. So in 2017, UNHCR estimated that, or in 2022, UNHCR estimates that since 2017, close to 1 million Rohingya refugees are living in Bangladesh. And despite the influx of Rohingya refugee students, education only makes up 5% of UNHCR's global budget in Bangladesh. And this is partly because some of the impacts of climate change have really created a risk to the existing refugee housing and settlements that are in the Cox's Bazar refugee camp. And so we see that as an outcome, housing and settlements receive the highest of $22 million in its humanitarian budget. However, we all understand and recognize the huge importance of education as a life-saving service, and one that provides refugee students with access to education, psychosocial support, mental health services, and essentially gives them an opportunity to thrive and grow. And so we see that comparing Uganda and Bangladesh, that Uganda has been able to understand its influx of refugees as a more development focus as well. Next slide, please. And again, this is just an overview of a visual overview of what that budget looks like. Next slide, please. And then Katie, I'll hand it over to you to finish us off.
Thanks. So we would be remiss to not talk about the United States when we're talking about foreign funding to other countries, because we have so many students who are arriving at our own borders that we're not always providing an adequate quality education. So here I've got the number: 83,000 undocumented children ages 3 to 17 are not enrolled in school. And when looking at that number, undocumented children can mean a lot of things, and legal status is really divisive in the US. So you have refugees, undocumented students, so many other qualifications that can really stigmatize young people and students looking for an education. So in our paper, we referred to first generation students to encompass all of these different, really just young people looking to learn. So there are protections in place in the US. You have Plyler v. Doe and Renee v. Flores. Both of them have been in place for decades now. The first, Plyler v. Doe, guarantees an education to students regardless of their guardian's actual or perceived national origin, citizenship, immigration status. All of this being said and done, that doesn't always happen in practice. And then Reno, which guarantees an educational services for unaccompanied minors in custody of immigration services. So again, these protections are in place, but we've definitely been falling short. So in addition to those legal protections, there are also programs, the Migrant Education Program, which is incorporated into our Title I. So pretty much it adds additional support to schools that are receiving a lot of students who are migrating throughout the US and working with farm workers movements. And all of that is to provide more school readiness, more specific language needs to these students. But in implementation isn't always getting to that student. So that money isn't always making it to them, as well as the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program and Refugee School Impact Program, which are very specific to refugees. So definitely falling short in implementation. And we have a few international, national, state and local recommendations. So Kai's going to cover those international recommendations, and then I'll get into the national level.
So for our international recommendations, we are asking for the US government to formally incorporate and ensure that EIE is fully included in its humanitarian funding programs, policies, and strategies. And looking forward to the Education Cannot Wait high-level financing conference happening next year. We're asking the US government to commit at least $50 million towards the $1.5 billion fundraising goal.
And then at the national, state, and local, so implementing and investing in teacher training programs focused on cultural respect and understanding, so responding to those social, emotional, mental health needs for first generation students, providing adequate bilingual education that's not English first, so resources for multilingual learners that really cover that first language that the students are learning. And then also establishing and developing laws, policies, funded programs, and curriculum for early childhood learners, again, regardless of that immigration status, and ensuring the holistic development of a child. So yeah, that kind of covers our paper, and we're looking forward to having it published later, I think in November.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that important report. But we have to move on with the other part of the session, but we will definitely talk at the end, and we'll have some time for that. And I will let it now my colleague Lotfia. She will moderate this next part of the session.
Thank you so much, Diana. And I think greetings to everybody. I wasn't here for our opening and welcome. Network challenges, South Africa and load shedding currently, but we have longer love we fight these challenges. So just to introduce myself, I am Lutfia Dean. Thank you so much, Diana, for holding the fort. So I'm part of the Youth Action Group of GCE, and I'm also a policy advisor of the All Africa Student Union. So in hearing these challenges that Katie and Pierina outlined, it's very true that implementation is a great challenge we face. And I found the numbers very impressive of the $50 million as an initiative to create that pool of funding. And I think it's so important that we as young people continue this narrative of demanding the funds we need, because yes, standing in solidarity with education, as our theme says, is not merely enough. We need the time for action, and action happens with funding, with projects, with programs and investment. So thank you so much for that insightful outline. I think when we speak as well to funding, and when we speak to implementation and the challenges and the lack thereof, we also need to know where young people stand in terms of safety. In the process of running out these projects, we need to understand, before we invest in the youth, are they in a safe position to receive education? Are they in a safe position to do maybe youth skills trainings and developments? And so that leads us to the concept of gender-based violence, and the concept also of sexual and reproductive health and their rights, their basic rights. So I'm currently working at WITS Reproductive Health and HIV Institute, which is one of Africa's largest healthcare research centers in Africa. And you see this big gap between queer bodies and women in the space. And I think it's so important that we as young people ensure that we know our rights. We know that we are fighting the cause of GBV as a second pandemic, and in conjunction with any other advocacy, because women, queer bodies remain marginalized in the fight for transformation and equality. So in talking to that, I'm going to let Irita Adisera build further, but just a brief introduction. Irita is the founder and director general for the Realize Africa, which is a Nigerian-based organization which works on issues around gender-based violence, as well as sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think also in speaking to reproductive health and those rights, HIV is a large sector. So I also think we must talk about that, because it still has the stigma. Years past, we still speak of them as those infected instead of those living with. So over to you, Rita. I just want to know, what have you guys within Realize been doing around equipping young people across Africa? And I don't know if you have any global initiatives as well, in terms of raising this awareness, in terms of telling young people, these are your rights. This is how you fight gender-based violence. These are your support systems, and just equipping them to ensure that they are protected in society, because it's a real plague that keeps growing. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lufia. Thank you. I think, I don't know whether I have access to my slide because it was sent. I don't know whether it's there. There was this, we shared our slide earlier on. I don't know whether you have it.
Yes, I'll share it now.
Okay, okay. So thanks for the opportunity, and it's also good to be part of this special meeting of young people across the world, trying to see how we can engage and build a better society. So my name is Ireti Adeshida. I'm the founder and director general of Realize Africa. And basically, one thing that we do, if you look at what we that's our project, is the place of ensuring that we build media advocacy, because our major focus is the power of the media. Thank you. You talked about the issue of reproductive health, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the ending gender-based violence. Those are our key areas. And one thing we have discovered is that you can move to the next slide, please, so you can see. So what we have discovered is that we know that there's a lot of things when it comes to the media. The media has, when it comes to the reach of the media, you can't really contain it. The media reach is so powerful, and that's why we are using basically the power of the media. That's why we call it media advocacy. But before you can push, also engage young people to go to train them, and that is what we try to do. Sexual rights and issues relating to gender-based violence, because these are some of the prevailing issues, especially in Africa, though we also have it as a global challenge. So that's some of the things that we've done. So you can This is just what we have done, how we are able to empower women, work with girls in schools, and also work with boys and ensure that we have a good feedback. So looking at, thanks to GCE, we're able to start the Media Advocates Skills Africa project that's called MASA. You can go to the next slide. Young people across Africa, to try to train them and develop their capacity in the area of media advocacy. So this is the flyer, and we're able to achieve that thanks to the support that came through GCE. And what we do is that, because for people to get the word out, there's a place of education, there's a place of building their capacity, and that's why we use education, educating them through the virtual platform we created. There was an e-learning platform whereby young people across Africa were able to learn and engage with us. You can also, let's have this next slide, where we had 31 in different parts. So we had 2 from Ghana, we had 2 from Ghana, we had 3 from Kenya, we had 7 from Uganda, and we had 19 from Nigeria. And we're able to reach out to about 2,500 young people across different parts of Africa. Because the whole idea is that apart from training them, the advocates are meant to step down the information. So don't just keep what you have learned to yourself, step it down into your community. So within the period of 3 to 4 months, they were able to educate and engage about 2,500 community dwellers across. So, and that's just the beauty of it, and it's been a very good thing. And presently we have 7 of these of the 7 as advocates who are working with us as interns and developing content across different platforms, using the social media, using radio, using online TV to engage. Because the major thing about media is that just let's keep getting the word out. And let's look at the next slide. So what we had to do was that, okay, after the training, we had to engage the master graduates, those who were part of the training, and some young people, because for those who are familiar with what happened in Nigeria, for over 7 months, we had the that's the school strike. We call it ASU strike. That's the university where we're out of school because of strike action by the lecturers. So what we decided to do was that, okay, please, what can we do? How can we keep some of our young people who are supposed to be in school in the university? How can we get them engaged? And that's why they work together with our media advocate that were trained through the GCE project. So we're able to on radio to speak about issues on child marriage, female genital mutilation, and some other issues. And that's what we have here. So we had 12 girls that made it to the competition. 70 girls showed up for the auditioning, and 12 girls were able to make it to the competition. And this is what we have. So the next slide. So after that, we discovered that, okay, apart from just the radio show, that's the speech competition, we discovered there is need to build their capacity. And that is one of the things we try to, because for you to engage girls, for you to engage community dwellers, there's a place of mentorship. So that's why we have our mentorship across different parts that came to sit down with mentors in different areas. After that, the next slide, we had the communication engagement. Because what we discovered was that we discovered that some of these girls, they were able to exhibit some communication skills. And we decided that, okay, let's not leave these girls just to end, let's not end it at the mentorship circle. Let's go into development. Successfully trained that period to become media advocates. And some of them are school reporters. Now they report for their schools. They address issues relating to gender. Come out to talk about it. So these are some of the things that we try to engage the girls to after. So the next slide also, we are of recent, that was about 2 weeks ago, we had International Day of the Girl Child, where we were able to host, we were able to have 12 of these girls that came out. Sorry, this okay, it was supposed to be the international. Can look at it now, look at the pictures here. The show was anchored by girls alone, our trained girls. All the adults were, you know, we had to step aside, the youth moderator and also as a guest. And it was a wonderful time engaging with others. So it was a wonderful presentation that we had, and people had to call in and engage with some of these girls. Some of them now are in schools engaging. So looking at it, we have a lot of challenges. I know we don't really have much time. That's why I'm trying to rush. One of the challenges that we have is we're trying to look at the issue of our equipment, but we need more equipment to upgrade, because now we have more girls who are on the field, who are reporters, who are ready to carry the message out, because the major thing is just to train. After training them, they are supposed to get the message out. So some of them are field reporters in their schools. Then sometimes when you work with schools, there are a lot of bottlenecks and challenges. So we are trying to work around that. For the media equipment, we are trying to see how we can raise support for media equipment donation. Then in terms of funding too, for more advocacy, these are some of the challenges that we have. But one thing that we are seeing is that most of the time, they come around and tell us that, sir, it's been a wonderful time. I never knew that I have the opportunity to come on radio and speak, but thanks to Realize Africa for this great opportunity. So we are happy that we are building a new generation of young people who are using the media positively and engaging. So that's just the beauty of the work. I know if we had more time, we'll be able to talk more, but this is what we have. But the beauty of it is that we are transforming lives from the virtual events now into the communities.
Thank you so much. Could I ask Augusta to please the microphone? Who the person is? Augusta, please mute your microphone. Okay, so to proceed, I just want to say to you, Rita, thank you so much. We recognize and we truly do. Also amazing how you're taking a part of boys and girls and saying we're empowering both genders to ensure that, you know, civil society can be a safe space and we can see what young people are capable of if it is a safe space. And, you know, through that, I just want to say it ties in very well to the theme of this, which is enough solidarity, it's time for action. Because what we're trying to say also is that we no longer want to say we're amplifying the voice of the voiceless, because those people of these marginalized groups do have a voice. It's just that they're chosen not to be heard. So using media, using platforms and empower them, enable them is amazing. And I know we were pressed for time, but I do know that GCE always tries to create these platforms, and this is the beginning of a joint partnership. So we'll definitely have more talks and maybe create bigger projects together as All Africa Student Union, GCE, GSF, and all other member organizations. So in talking to the gaps of communication as well, I think research is a large factor. And comments, we have a lot of people pleading for the publications to be shared, and I think it's amazing. We should create a think tank. You know, Vicky will work on that as well, and we'll support as the Youth Action Group of publications from young people, from our youth coalition organizations. And in publishing and in creating a narrative of research that is young, that is intersectional, that is the future, it's very important. And research fills these gaps. And when we speak to implementation, it's also about what are we trying to implement, what are the gaps, and going back and reflecting and producing more research, more reports, and actually acting on these. So in talking to research, I'm now going to engage with Daryl Cruz, who is a research and communications officer at the ENET in Philippines. And Daryl, in a nutshell, very quick, 2 minutes, please. Could you please give us a brief on the Futures of Education report? Like I said, the value of reports and the value of a narrative that we put out there as young people is so important. So the report was obviously written through the youth-led action research. And I just want to know, what was the voice, what was the aim, and where are we heading with this research? Thank you so much. Over to you, Daryl.
Hello everyone. So Anton will be starting the presentation, And following her presentation, Darren will start and will answer the questions which we have been asked in this panel.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Can hear you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ngọc Anh.
Hello, Priyanka.
Yes, Paul is signing the presentation, and we have a sign language interpreter who would be talking what her signs are.
Okay, we do have an interpreter on the call as well. So if we could just continue due to the time constraints, we have an
Ngọc Anh here. Ngọc Anh here. Okay. So you can see me. My name is Ngọc Anh, and I am the member here today to share about the future of education. And we have a group of the deaf youth in Vietnam, and we try a lot to get more the deaf innovation, and I'm support for the deaf now. I would like to share the first slide with you. Here on the screen is 5 members of ASPE. You can see we have the facilitating media and communication come from the Đông Timor, the NCE Nepal, the CED Sri Lanka, INET Philippines, VAFA, and all of the members working together to support for the future of education. As you can see, we want to introduce a little bit about our member, like facilitating media and communication since 1978. We are they are a media organization working to empower grassroots community through the various media and communication strategy. The CCEP is an education coalition based in Timor-Leste working on monitoring research and advocacy for policy changes to ensure quality education for all Timors by 2030. And CED Sri Lanka is a consortium of 57 organizations that are actively involved in the education sector at the national, provincial, and local level in Sri Lanka. NCE Nepal is a national network of 364 member organizations, including international and local NGOs and other CSO groups. INET Philippines is a national coalition of civil society organizations engaging in policy, advocacy, and partnerships for education reforms, and work with the government in the implementation and monitoring of the Education for All campaign. And VAFA, the association operates the nationwide in the field of education and training under the state management of the Ministry of Education and Training. Please come to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. That slide. Now I want to introduce you and explain for you about what is the future of education. We have a timeline here, start in the years 2050. During its 50th anniversary celebration, ASBE analyzed the current and emerging context and role of education. Same year, ASBE members participate in UNESCO Bangkok's workshop, Rethinking Education Through Imagining Future Scenario, and conducted similar conversation within their own organization. And in year 2019, ASBE very actively participated in the discussions within the Global Campaign for Education GCE, International Council for Adult Education ICIE, and UNESCO, building on its previous rethinking on education system with members. In year 2021, through ASBE Youth-led Action Research, a published report on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the marginalized youth expressed their concerns over the growing distance between their education and their lives. So as part of its commitment for an intergenerational voice to inform its work, ASBE, in collaboration with its member and marginalized youth, brings in diverse youth perspective into the future of education discussions, keeping in mind the changes in society and imagining sustainable futures for and with the young people. Next slide, please. And now I want to emphasize the objectives of future of education. The first thing is anticipate its global issues and concerns. Second is collectively aspire for purposeful and inclusive education. Explore possible actions to achieve the imagined future for education. Especially address contemporary issues and anxiety of the youth in education, as well as their aspirations, be it access, fulfillment, or application of knowledge and skills. The intention of the exercise is to give precedence to the youth and learners for in the formal engagement with education. And ASBE, as well as ASBE members' contribution to the UNESCO's initiative here, you can see youth members of ASBE conducted workshops to reach out to and build spaces for exchange with young people from marginalized communities from December 2020 to March 2021 via Zoom online platform. The workshop were organized in 6 countries of Asia Pacific region, namely Timor-Leste, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Philippines, India, and Vietnam. The objectives of the workshop were to envision the education system for 2050, anticipating its global issues and concerns, collectively aspire for purposeful and inclusive education, and explore possible action to achieve these imagined futures for education. The workshop were creatively designed to accommodate the expression of multitude of contexts and imagination of the youth in acknowledging the role of art and creative expression for the greater inclusion. The youth partners of ASBE use illustration, clay molding, theater, song, poetry, games, role play, panel discussion, and focus group discussion, and the media of exchange in the workshop. Next slide, please.
So the ongoing efforts to build inclusive structures are important entry points into the discussions on education. This would involve listening to the voices from the ground. So why is it significant for us to listen to the voices from the margins? Because the youth and learners' voices are often left out in the collective thinking and rethinking about education, but they have a lot to offer from their journeys in learning. We reflected on the current context of education. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing issues and revealed several gaps in the education system. The accelerated use of technology for digital learning has left many behind. Young people are struggling physically, mentally, and financially. Lack of inclusivity in schools for marginalized communities exist, and the LGBTQIA+ community experience bullying and harassment. Teachers are also unwilling to adapt to the changing times, such as the need to mainstream sex education in curriculums, the lack of digital applications for sign language that explains words with illustration, and neglecting students who may not perform as per expectations, erasure of local cultures with modern education. On the next slide, we will show you a short video presenting different identities who have shared their insights through US-based Future of Education Report 2021. So the message is clear. Education is a basic human right. Youth are often left out, but it is crucial to hear them. We must bring the voices from the margins to the center. Let us support our youth in shaping futures of education. There are a lot of recommendations in this compilation of country consultations documented by following 6 participating ASBE members. Our work was highly appreciated by UNESCO and UNICEF, was also included in the listings of the Global Report on Futures of Education. These are some of the recommendations, and I think we will have to move on because I only have 1 minute to wrap up the speech. But basically, our work was highly appreciated by UNESCO and UNICEF and was included in the listings of Global Report on the Futures of Education. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you both for sharing that, and definitely it's very inspiring what you share about the report. And also there was a point that was very interesting about when we think about the futures of education, we think about preparing for the future also, and including diverse youth perspectives, and also about you talk about a part which is called issues and anxieties of youth in education, as well as aspirations should be included. And this takes us to our next conversation, which is mental health And for that, we will have Ellen Dixon. She is the part of the steering committee member at the Global Student Forum. And also, she's a national researcher and academic quality advisor of the New Zealand Union of Students. And we will talk about the mental health and well-being of students during and after the pandemic. So for that, could you share or give to us some insights into the mental health and well-being of students during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, please?
Thank you so much, Diana. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can see my presentation. There we go. It's all good to go. So firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to the Global Campaign for Education for inviting me to speak with you today as you move towards the World Assembly policy document. I think the importance of these conversations for solidarity and especially for action is so important in these complex times to create a quality education system. I would like to thank my colleague Carmen for kindly suggesting my inclusion in today's event, and to Itori and Amilcar, who were the original sparks behind our recent policy paper, which you see the title here. What I hope you get from today's short presentation is that students, while suffering from some threats to their well-being, are not singularly passive recipients of mental health concerns. But first and foremost, I'm Ellen from the Steering Committee of the Global Student Forum for Australia, New Zealand and Canada. I am also, as stated, the National Researcher for the New Zealand Union of Students Associations. And I will disclose as well, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I have partnered with practitioners. The GSF is the umbrella organisation of the world's major representative, independent and democratic school and university student unions. We represent the interests of 202 student unions from 122 different countries, and the logos that you see down in the corner are the ones who are currently representing in the steering committee. Over here we have a photo of our lovely team who were at the Transforming Education Summit recently. I'm standing there in the purple jacket. They came from all over the world to participate in connection with the Youth Declaration and a number of other things. So the World Bank estimated that mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorders and schizophrenia involve 10 to 20% of children and adolescents around the world. That estimated among tertiary students is 1 in 5 who have a diagnosed mental health disorder. This does not include those who have conditions that are undiagnosed or who have self-diagnosed, which technically means the number is actually higher. This is why many people are calling mental health the silent pandemic. We all live the reality of the physical pandemic, lockdowns, getting sick, fast moves to virtual learning platforms, social isolation, and mass education disruption. UNICEF reported school closures for more than 168 million children across the globe in 2021 in more than 200 territories, and this increased to 1.6 billion young people at the height of the pandemic, estimating a total of $17 trillion US in losses to students' lifetime earnings from the disruption. For students, this resulted in anxiety, stress, and depression, also due to financial constraints we've already heard about, and unemployment. This was in addition to student concerns about health infrastructures, with those on and off campuses struggling to find swift and consistent health and counselling services, legal and employment aid, adequate support for substance abuse, and access to affordable medication. This is where student organisations come in. The way that student organisations responded during the pandemic was not to try and raise awareness of mental health issues singularly, but to try and address health infrastructure and policy concerns. Over here in the corner, we have the Canadian Federation of Students, who instigated their graduate student mental health toolkit and their campus wellbeing survey. This identified key actions that institutions could carry out to evaluate mental health, including regular surveillance of mental health indicators, mental health prevention services, early detection services, and treatment services, to name a few. Studio Matrix from India is next in the middle. They worked with psychologists and biochemists to create a series of programs aimed at student mental health and wellbeing delivered nationally during the pandemic, which they have now created as an ongoing program. And a shout out to my lovely colleagues at the All Africa Students Union. I know that you're there. who they partnered with the Connected Minds to launch a mental health campaign focused on the use of social media and local and international advocacy spaces. They also use these tools to get subsidized counseling services for students. So students are actually actively seeking structural answers to their own mental health issues. These mirror the calls, these student organizations are mirroring the calls of the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health, who has told states and the WHO that there was a need for clear and holistic mental health campaigns to minimize discrimination and stigma that is often experienced in developing nations, but also that the WHO needs to ensure essential medications are tested and accessible. This also kind of reflects where the WHO went in the 2019 and 2023 Special Initiative for Mental Health. It's kind of interesting because if you look very closely, it starts to resemble some of the conversations on financing education we recently had at the Transforming Education Summit, with the WHO stating, mental health requires much larger overall investment. An ongoing, long-standing issue is that mental health across health, social, education, and other sectors has been heavily underfunded. Countries spend on average only 2% of their health budgets on mental health. Mental health care must be included in healthcare benefit packages and insurance schemes to ensure essential mental health needs are covered. Capacity of staff needs to be built across health, social, and educational sectors to address mental health, especially in low and middle income countries. So what are students identifying with? That they are so aware of the need to have conversations on health infrastructure, the health sector, and financing in general. We have to ask whether the education system itself has made them conscious of this in some ways. A study in the UK in 2019 found that the test to teach culture supported in schools and the higher education institutions was a leading cause of mental health illness. Increasingly imbalanced teacher to student ratios have been found to create anxiety in the classroom. It is reoccurring that graduate students in higher education are suffering from workplace precarity, but they are also now told that they will encounter burnout and imposter syndrome when they are trying to write their thesis. Meanwhile, teachers are expected to manage at-risk students and identify key mental health issues that they are not necessarily trained for, all the while not having sufficient supports themselves, especially with the global teacher shortage. Consequently, one of my favorite authors, Byung-Chul Han, if you haven't read him, check him out, he's wonderful, argues that when mental health illness is considered as an individual responsibility instead of a social challenge to be addressed by the public and private sectors, it results in an immunological age characterized by neurological illnesses such as depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, BPD, and burnout syndrome. What he is saying is that young people and people in general are increasingly aware that neoliberalism or economic codes of conduct have already eroded the welfare state, with student awareness of mental health illness reflecting this. This changes the way that we actually think about students and mental health. This is the purpose of this policy paper. Students in this context are not passive recipients of mental health illnesses, but are conscious political actors aware of the impact of individualizing stress in their educational experiences. So what do we do to address this? Involving students in mental health awareness campaigns on campuses, embedding content in mental health and well-being into curricula, engaging students in conversations on mental health policies, getting them to aid in advocating for financing of mental health systems for educators is that type of partnership and action that is essential here. I hope as you continue to work towards the GCE World Assembly policy document, it is acknowledged that students and youth are conscious actors for health justice in our collective move to transform education. This is the ultimate call of our policy paper, which will be released shortly that you can read. A rights-based orientation to health and education financing, rather than a false societal blame that is placed on individuals, stating that a person simply isn't well enough or educated enough. When such rhetoric occurs, it is not simply symptomatic of a pandemic, but potentially also of an unwell society. Thank you so much for having me today. It's been a pleasure to be able to share with you. I turn it back over to you guys at the team and I wish you all well.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And you were actually perfect on time of your presentation. So thank you very much. And as we can see, financing education, it's always connected with everything we do. As Ellen was mentioning, there is less than 3% of budgets being, for mental health and for mental health education. So part of this is because we don't have enough financing for that. For example, in our region, in Central American region, mental health education is not a thing. It's not actually something we do at schools or universities, and it's something very important. And how also to learn about how youth were affected by unemployment, social distancing, and other things that actually were making an impact on the lives of youth. But it's very great to see how you and youth are doing, like in students, things like the Kit for Mental Health. We also had the stress management program and the Connected Minds, which is counseling online for mental health. Thank you very much for that. And now we will go through our next panelists. And now we're going to hear from our GCE Secretariat and how youth and students can be involved in the GCE's initiatives. So for that, we will have Punza Lutanco. She's part of the GCE Secretariat. And we will hear about the gender and feminism strategy of GCE. So could you give us some insight of GCE's gender and feminism strategies, and also how youth and students can become involved and engage more with GCE?
Okay, thank you, Diana, for the opportunity, and thank you for the youth space for allowing me to engage you on. Today I'll be speaking on GCE's plans and work on gender and feminism. So GCE's education commitment to gender has a key focus on advocacy and programmatic interventions that are aiming to address the gendered education priority. Now, what we focus on when you're looking at the education crisis is prioritizing the education of girls and boys' education, particularly in spaces that are vulnerable in society. Now, to give you a bit of context of what informs our advocacy is the gender education crisis of about 129 million young girls and women and 128 million young boys are out of school based on the discrimination of their race, religion, sexual orientation, and ethnicity, and people living with disability. Additionally, as we have seen due to the COVID-19, there has been exacerbation of gender inequalities due to the global political motivated pushback of conservative movements that lack the political commitment to close the gender disparities that are currently at unprecedented levels that are impacting the education of girls and boys. Now, the interventions that our advocacy work focuses at GCE are specific regional context based on different religion, with key focus on school-related gender-based violence, child marriages, sexual health, reproductive health, equitable teacher remuneration that is not on the basis of gendered, and girls' education in emergency context. By addressing these challenges and issues, we place the GCE's gender work as its main priority and as a cross-cutting theme in education financing. How much of the investment that countries are spending and international donors to address gender inequalities in education. Education emergencies. How are we advocating for safe schools during times of procrastinated crisis, as well as how do we contribute and ensure that we have a gender transformative education at the global and country levels? We do this by looking at the GCE gender strategy that we adopted in 2021 and where we established a working group with the representation of each regional constituency. This representation is to ensure that we have a context-specific geographical reality, and briefly outlining the implementation plan of our gender work is what are the kinds of social and behavioral change interventions can be adopted to tackle stigma and discrimination within the movement and promote inclusion. How do we increase the body of evidence on understudied gender issues in education? And how do we promote in producing practical tools and resources at the country level to ensure that our schools are safe? and one of the advocacy initiatives that focus on keeping a girl child in school while addressing issues of child pregnancy, forced marriages, gender-based violence, or producing policy recommendations in order to hold the international world's and governments account for the human rights violations that are gender motivated. Now, the opportunities for youth to engage in the spaces that as GCE, we invite the youth to include a representative or two that will represent the reality that I just saw today of representative maybe living with a disability, a queer individual, or someone that will be able to really support us in the work that we do in order for us to have a well-founded, diverse group. We need you guys in order for us to support us in identifying practical, real solutions and be foot soldiers that will be able to drive our activism work focused on gender and to contribute to the collective thinking of what we mean about transformative gender education.
I don't know if we have a connection challenge. I'm just going to ask for either Diana or Vicky to just let me know.
Yes, I think we lost Pumza.
Yes, I think she lost connection.
Okay, so I think we can just, build on to a bit of what Pumza said. She gave a very insightful outline. Something for me that always stands out about GC, and I think we should acknowledge our hosts of the day, especially the Secretariat, all the hard work, and also for bringing together these partnerships. I said in the comment that the partnerships are so powerful, and I don't say that in vain. I mean, we truly see what we produce with GCF, what we produce with All Africa Student Union, with Studio Matrix, and so many other organizations and all the GCE coalitions. And I always have viewed, the GCE Secretariat also as a space and an incubator hub for young people. I recall in my first year of university, straight out of high school, I had done a bit of work within GCE, and Grant was so welcoming, sharing tools of analysis, sharing some documents to say, yeah, read, learn. And I think that's something as young people we always need to engage in. We need to ensure, like Pumza said, we study the, those understudied gender aspects, the understudied intersectional aspects. And she also spoke about how GCE is very strategic, and I think many other organizations here deserve that tap on the shoulder. We're very strategic in ensuring that we have a regional approach. So we don't make one umbrella tool or analytical framework. We provide a regional base of identifying the problem and providing the solution before implementing projects. And I think that's very valuable in ensuring that we succeed as young coalitions, that we succeed as advocacy agents. So let's keep up that good work. Let's ensure that our and our tools and our projects and implementation is very specific, and we study the problem in that area, because I do believe that no two countries have the exact same challenges. Yes, they may be similar, it may be poor governance, but how exactly, in what sense, and how are we as young people getting into these systems and dismantling it? So thank you so much for that, Pumza. I hope that you're still on the call for the questions later, because I think a lot of people would like to inquire more. But over to Louise now, Eduardo Perez Murcia, who's also part of the Secretariat. And I think, like I said, research is integral in the work we do as activists, in the work we do as comrades, because if we do not study and analyze where that problem lies, finding solutions is a great challenge. So, Louise, I'd just like to ask you, in terms of research, you've been very involved in research in GCE. Could you please just share with us some of the research initiatives and how youth and students can become involved, and also if there are future plans and how we integrate young people into this? Because like we said, we're handing the baton over to young people, we're partnering, and the time is now. No longer solidarity, no longer tweeting or social media activism, but we're taking it and we're saying, let's do it now. Thank you, Louise. Over to you.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you very much. And thank you, Vicky, for organizing this and this kind invitation. So I am going just to share with you some ideas about how youth can engage and youth students with issues around research. I have structured my presentation. I hope you are already seeing my presentation. Is that the case, Lucia? Okay, so I have
Yes,
structured my
you can.
Yeah, I have structured my presentation.
So I just wanted it to be made larger. Thank you.
Okay, now it's larger or not? It's in my screen completely.
Yes, large now. It's covering the whole screen so everyone can follow as you speak.
Okay, thank you. So I structured my presentation in three main parts. First of all, I want to share with you all how the Global Campaign for Education understands research and the role of research in our work. Then I will give you some examples or recently completed research or ongoing research projects that might be of your interest. And finally, to just present some preliminary ideas of how we can collaborate, how youth and youth students can engage in the Global Campaign for Education research activities. So moving on the content of my presentation, the very first idea is the role of of research in the Global Campaign for Education work. A very important issue here is that we embrace all kinds of research, but due to lack of funding and also people doing research in our movement, we have to be very selective and we very much focus on what is so-called policy-oriented research. Generally speaking, policy-oriented research is that research that we do believe that this has the potential to influence policy at different levels. And we select when to do research or when to commit ourselves to deliver a piece of research when we find at least three key elements. The very first one is a learning opportunity. At the end, as in every piece of research, we want to learn something new. We do research to learn things that we don't know. And in that particular case, we identify a research topic that is basically a problem affecting people's right to education. And when we see that, we also examine to what extent this issue can be better approached by policymakers by doing research. So that is the reason we engage to try to understand the research design, the research methods, and put all our efforts to understand that particular problem. Then we always work with our members, I mean the national, regional members, and we identify the research sites for the research with them. This is a very collaborative process, and I have to say a very democratic process. Because of the limitation of resources, we have to be also selective where is best to invest our resources and to develop a piece of research. And finally, the key element of this very first part is whether and how we can influence policy. As I said at the beginning, we are doing policy-oriented research, so we need to create a very clear link with policy, how policymakers can potentially use our research to do what they have to do in terms of the respect, protection, and fulfillment of everyone's right to education. And then we expect and we work with our members for them to use their research findings to influence advocacy and campaigns. Then, the second part of my presentation is just briefly sharing with you some of our recent research or ongoing research. And I have three examples to showcase our research with you all. First of all, a project that is called the Alleviation Mechanisms and Education Financing. The overarching aim of this project is to understand whether and how countries can find more resources for education if they are able to apply for any of debt mechanisms. I am talking about debt alleviation, debt cancellation, or perhaps swap for education. We conduct this research in the 7 countries you can see in my screen: El Salvador, Zambia, Gambia, Nepal, Mongolia, Lebanon, and Georgia. And one of the key findings of this research is that when we talk about debt mechanisms, we can overgeneralize. There are not a single recipe that works for every country. As Lucia mentioned, all the countries have different contexts, different experience, and different challenges. Perhaps we can identify some commonalities, but we can introduce countries and our coalitions to make mistakes. In this particular case, for example, debt alleviation mechanisms can apply in some countries, but definitely not for others. In the case of Georgia that you see at the latest point, we can find that any debt alleviation mechanism work for them because of the policy framework of the country and because of the level of development of the country. But if we look at Zambia, Gambia, and Nepal, they all can apply for either debt alleviation or debt cancellation. And the findings of the research show that they will increase substantially the funding for education. The second project, Education Financing Observatory. This is a very exciting project the Global Campaign for Education launched in 2021, and we are examining a very fundamental question that not other observatory is addressing, whether and how countries are investing the maximum of resources available to them to effectively respect, protect, and fulfill everyone's right to education. It looks pretty basic, but it is not. And so this is the reason we just conducted a pilot exercise in these 4 countries, Honduras, Somalia, Tanzania, and Georgia. What we have learned, examining the period between 2015 and 2021, none of these 4 countries have invested the maximum of resources available to protect everyone's right to education. This is a very substantial finding. And when you examine in detail, for example, in Somalia, Somalia was expecting to invest, according to the commitments of the country, between 2015 and 2021, at least 12% of the budget for education. The overarching, the general target is between 15 and 20. But how much they invested? In 2019, only 1%. That is partly the reason, or maybe a fundamental reason why in Somalia, only 9% of students with disabilities are enrolled into education. This is also the reason why 40%, only 40% of children and youth from nomadic communities attend school, and they are the majority in the country. And this is also one of the reasons why 60%, 60, of the budget for education depend on international ID or cooperation. That is a critical issue. And I do believe it's different. For example, when you the students, youth people, go to your government in Somalia and say, okay, you need more funding for education. That is fine. But this is a very general message. If you go with the findings and show all this evidence, I am very sure you will get more attention and probably more impact. The very last project I want to share with you very briefly is the harnessing technology as a response to COVID-19. That is also a very exciting project led by my colleague Wolfgang Leumer. And we are doing this research in these 7 countries. What we have learned that the digital divide has multiple phases, multiple dimensions. In some of these countries, the problem is electricity, electronic devices. In other countries, teachers lack skills to teach and to go into online lessons. And in many cases, parents just struggle to see and to understand what the children are doing, and in particular, during the main waves of the pandemic, what they were doing where schools were closed and they were trying to learn in that particular challenging time for all. Well, opportunities for youth people and youth students to engage with us in research. 3 main ideas. First of all, as I mentioned at the very beginning, research is a learning opportunity. I do believe that youth students and youth can really take advantage of this research that is available for you all to identify a better understanding of what is happening in these countries, to get a kind of comparative framework to see that things are common but different, and we need different qualified messages to approach policymakers, governments, and to advocate for the right to education, and also to really engage with the key findings. That connects with my second point, use our research findings. We do believe that you all can use these findings to influence advocacy and campaigns. As I already mentioned, it's very different to go with very general ideas and to go with a report that is well structured, is based on empirical data, and you can use this empirical data to deliver a better and clear message to protect everyone's right to education and to commit the government to do so. And finally, collaboration, collaborative research. We are in the position to support your efforts, and maybe you can also engage with national coalitions to help them to develop the research design of a particular project or to develop a research agenda and doing research with us. So hopefully we expect to get funding in the future to do some collaborative research with you. And we have to be very honest. Perhaps all of you love research, but we also need to gain skills every day to understand really what kind of research design, research methods, research questions work for a particular piece of research and how this particular piece of research can really influence policy, advocacy, and campaigns. That is the very aim of the Global Campaign for Education, with its commitment to protect everyone's right to education. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Lupilla and Vicky. I'm very happy to address any comments or questions you may have at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A very insightful presentation, and I hope everybody has a deeper understanding of the GCE goals in terms of research. I also want us now to just move on swiftly to the next speaker, who is Shama Bulengis, and they are part of the Transformation of Education as the co-chair. They're also part of the Feminist Coalition of a Youth-Led Network, and they work with many youth activists with a shared mission to accelerate progress for gender equality in education, hosted by the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. And they are a queer feminist from Philippines, so very involved on the ground in terms of gender equality. So Shama, I just wanted to know if you could please give us some insights into the gender transformative education, as well as your work that you've been conducting to ensure the rights and the protection of LGBTQ women in the Asian region, and also how do we ensure that there's safe spaces for these bodies in society and within the community. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And before I start, I just want to say that I almost threw out my entire speech because I really wanted to talk about internet connections. I was almost like, I was in and out of this call for a while because of internet connection, internet connectivity, and we know how the right to being able to access internet is just so basic, but also so neglected, especially in the global South. So I almost wanted to talk about that more, but thank you so much for this one, and thank you very much, Luis, for that presentation. It's very difficult to follow, to be honest, because it was very thorough, and I wanted to do a little bit more high level as well for this for my intervention right now. I'm going to just quickly share a link to everybody. This is the Gender Transformative Education Brief that has been developed with Angay as well, and this has also been shared within our Transform Education networks. And a lot of the technical things are on here, but I just want to recognize that the technical things are only going to be as impactful and as scaled up once there's political commitment from education ministries, from our political leaders as well. Sorry, let me just pull up my notes. And, you know, as young people, we know how strong an influence education has to us, whether that's formal, informal, or non-formal education. However, we have to recognize how education as a formal institution within many of our countries from the global South are from colonial and patriarchal roots. This has given us unbalanced power structures between administrators, teachers, students, which especially disadvantages young girls, queer, gender non-conforming folk. This has also given us a lack of, or virtually no curriculum, or a lack of curriculum and research placed that responds to the context of students from lower income class families, especially for those that are living in hard to reach areas. This has also given us metrics that measure based on global North standards. And even if it does measure based on global South standards, the credits of these strides are also credited still to the global North. And we all know this way too much. For us, for majority countries and historically structurally excluded communities, it is more often than not clear where the power lies and how that power acts. And people who experience oppression like us are more aware of how the oppressor acts than the oppressor themselves. Hence, education, as it is influenced by all of these outside or inside formal institutions, have the power to replicate these colonial and patriarchal roots, but most importantly, to challenge all of these inequalities as well. And it is clear to us how difficult this work is. It is clear to us that this work extends outside of the classroom and into our communities and our families. It's clear from all of the interventions before me how class, gender, race, ability, citizenship affects the way you access economic and social capital. Therefore, the response to this work is not to work in silos, and the recognition that sustainable development works alongside gender equality, alongside decolonization, alongside global citizenship, alongside community consciousness. This means that the work is complex, but because the work is so complex, everybody needs to pitch in. We can't just leave it to our politicians, but especially them, actually. And these decision makers in terms of passing policies that support the type of transformation we want to see, to give young people the agency to be able to change these policies that affect us. And this work is beyond formal education. And this is community work. Thank you very much, Luis, for your presentation earlier. And I do agree that the type of research that is needed is currently lacking, at least in our communities, especially for queer communities. The type of research that is needed in terms of investing in gender transformative education, in terms of even investing in gender and development in our communities, is very much lacking. And even if we go and challenge our governments around this, one of the things that they always say to us is, even if we have all of this research, who are you? You're too young to be able to engage with us on this. And sometimes, just to nuance this, our situations are also not safe for us to be able to challenge our governments using these researches as well. So it's very important that it comes with both the research and the political commitment to keep our young people safe, to keep our students safe as we do our advocacy towards our governments. There was a Transforming Education Summit just recently, and we contributed to the Youth Declaration by conducting consultations with all of our members and networks. And this is the kind of research that we're only capable of doing as of the moment. And we especially affirm Article 4 and 5 of the Youth Declaration in demanding investments and gender transformative education and ensuring provision of quality comprehensive CSE for all learners in and beyond schools. And maybe, Luis, you can help us with like crafting a research that could possibly be best in terms of really looking at what types of investments and where do we get these money from, and where do we need to put this money in as well. As a Young Feminist Coalition, Transform Education intentionally works with our partners, our collaborators, our co-conspirators to create equal, intergenerational, and intersectional partnerships where both and all parties are valued. We want to see this reflected in ministries of education as well. We recognize that because of our individual capacities, we can only focus on so much on very specific issues, but we also know that we can collaborate together based on our individual expertise to create an intersectional program informed by evidence from our own experiences. And as these demands from high level get brought down to the technical level, challenging current imbalanced power structures also means that implementations that follow the work on transforming policies and political engagement, pedagogy, school environments, participation of children and young people, community leadership, stakeholder engagement, and evidence generation needs proactive accountability to women and girls. We want different marginalized identities represented at leadership, at staff level, at implementation, at monitoring, and even in phase 2 planning, along with dedicated education consultative bodies where young feminists and education activists are included and most especially heard. Also, here's the thing. Young feminists, environmentalists, education activists are already doing the work on this at community level. We all know this. We've already been doing this for a really long time. The problem is just for us to be able to scale this up. And scaling up of this work requires political commitment, and this commitment requires dedicated funding for young feminist movements, for us to be able to continue our work on ending SRGBV, school-related gender-based violence, for us to be able to continue our work on STEM and on STEM and gender equality, and feminist leadership and education. And the theme is right. We don't want solidarity. We're done with that. We want action. And what I've outlined here are just a few actions that are needed at a high level. A lot of the recommendations have already been put forward by all the people who are amazing presenters on here. If we are serious about changing our societies, we who are already doing the work need to push our leaders a lot more. And we're going to have to take all the recommendations, and they're gonna have to take all the recommendations here seriously. Thank you so much for reminding me of my time, Diana. I'm gonna end there. Back to you, Leah and Diana.
Thank you, Shama. So good to see you here again. We saw each other at the pre-summit in Paris, so it's so good to see you here again. Well, thank you very much for Luis. Luis is also working with my national coalition, which is Foro Dakar Honduras, and they're doing a great job. Thank you, Luis. And I do share that thought about research is like the step for leading to policy, to changes in policy. I think that's one of our fundamental things that we think at Foro Dakar. We are aware of that, and we share that we need research to back up our policy advocacy actions. You know, like we cannot do advocacy if we don't have something to stand for. Like we need that backup, like data, information, real thing, so that we can do advocacy actions and actually have an impact on that. So we're running a little bit out of time, but I want to present our last speaker. She's Brittany Ellis, and she is the Assistant Director of Emergency Coordinator Team at UNICEF USA. And we will talk about some snapshot of some of the programs and initiatives that UNICEF USA is undertaking in emergencies and with young people also.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm super excited to be with you all today. Just a note, I'm coming to you live from San Francisco, California. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here. And with that said, let's just jump right into the first slide. If we can just jump to thank you. So war, natural disasters, and other crises have uprooted large numbers of children and families, leaving them struggling to survive. Extreme weather events have become more frequent and intense due to climate change, causing widespread devastation and displacement. And in times of emergency, children suffer first and foremost. When children are unable to access an education due to living in a humanitarian crisis, the consequences are catastrophic. In addition to learning losses, children have less opportunities for physical exercise, decreased interactions with peers and teachers, and increased likelihood of experiencing violence at home. The cumulative effects of these stressful experiences, especially when combined with the mental health impacts of conflict, environmentally induced disasters, and forced displacement, can pose serious risks to children's rights and well-being, especially the most marginalized girls and adolescents. For example, in Yemen, more than 2 million children have dropped out of school due to poverty, conflict, and lack of opportunities, with an overall estimated 6 million children at risk of missing out on an education. The political transition in Afghanistan in mid-2021 resulted in an estimated 9.7 million children in need of humanitarian assistance, and now it threatens the learning and livelihoods for millions of children, especially girls. Myanmar's political crisis in February of 2021 led to considerable violence against children and has not only resulted in 1.2 million children who are now in need of humanitarian assistance, but has also negatively affected the education of 12 million children and adolescents. But UNICEF is on the ground supporting children in emergencies with access to education, and what UNICEF has been able to accomplish is really remarkable. If we can move to the next slide, please. So in 2021, UNICEF supported 31.7 million children, 50% of which were girls, in emergency situations to access learning opportunities. The largest proportion of those were supported at the primary school level at 68%, followed by lower secondary at 15%, pre-primary at 12%, and upper secondary at 5%. This also includes the provision of learning materials to 18.1 million children living in emergency humanitarian settings and supporting nearly 3 million children with access to early learning and pre-primary education. Also, 51% of all children targeted for education in emergencies period were targeted by UNICEF. So some examples of how UNICEF's education in emergencies programming looks like. So for example, UNICEF will scale up community-based education classes in settings where children may be unable to access education through the government. So in Afghanistan, for example, so far this year, UNICEF has supported 283,000 children, 55% of which are girls, with educational opportunities through nearly 10,000 community-based education classes. Another example, in the direct aftermath of a sudden onset emergency, UNICEF will typically set up temporary learning centers to ensure that children can continue to access an education. So in Pakistan, following the recent floods, which have affected over 33 million people, UNICEF immediately set up temporary learning centers. And according to the latest figures, UNICEF has established 127 temporary learning centers in some of the hardest hit areas, reaching over 10,000 children, of which nearly 50% are girls. In addition, UNICEF has engaged with partners to dewater and clean school buildings so they become safe for children to resume learning. Throughout the Sahel region, where there are elevated numbers of children out of school, for example, in Burkina Faso, where 55% of children, at least 55% of children, do not access an education due to formal school closures from conflict, UNICEF is building out the curriculum of Quranic schools, which are community-based schools that many children regularly attend to learn about the Quran. So UNICEF is identifying and modernizing these schools to include language and math classes, and therefore using informal education structures that already exist in order to increase children's formal education prospects. Now, before we go to the next slide, just so you know, on the next slide, there will be a short video, and this is going to be a video that really speaks to the power of UNICEF programming. Okay, well, we can just go on and show the video if we're short on time. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, sure, that's fine. But just so you know, the video was of a volcano eruption.
Siku moja ilitomboka magharibi, nilitoka nje nikakuta mawingu ishakuwa aruje, akaona moto ikwashuka juu, tulionaka moto ikakia mbio sana. Sasa tulirudiaka tukakuta vitu visha lungula, uniforme zangu, chakoshi yangu na makae. Sasa nilionaka nikasema make sitasoma tena juu vitu yangu ya masomo visha lungula. Sasa tulifika kwa masomo akatupokelesha mashakoshi na makae na mabike na mabwati. Ninafurahi sana, tunaona mwaka itakuwa mzuri. Sana maliza masomo natendaka nikuwe president.
Great, I know we're running on time, so I'll just conclude there, but thank you so much. It was, I really enjoyed giving this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think due to the time constraints, we'll definitely have another engagement further. Thank you so much, Brittany. So I just want to know from the crowd, I only have time to take one hand, very short. So please could I have a hand raise? I think I'll see the reaction over here. Anybody have a quick comment? I'm not seeing any reactions. Okay. So I don't think we have any comments. Is that what we're getting? I'm just checking again so we don't leave anybody out. Okay. So I don't think we possibly do have engagements, but maybe the time constraints, so everyone's just holding it back. But we're going to create another platform. We will work on it. And I see in the comments we have, after schools were destroyed, students had to wait for the rebuilding of schools, or there were other forms of learning, such as online learning, that were adopted. Do you want to answer that quickly as our one question, Brittany, since your presentation was halted?
Sure. Yes. Well, the rebuilding of the schools did take some time, but like I mentioned before, UNICEF was able to set up temporary learning centers using makeshift tents where children were able to receive an education in the interim.
Okay, thank you so much. So, I mean, you see, that shows the adaptability of youth organizations and of organizations that are giving back to society. So keep up all the good work. To all our speakers, thank you so much. In closing, I want to just hand over to Grant Kawasenjete, who is our Global Coordinator for Global Campaign for Education. As mentioned earlier on, he's a very big baton and he's a big gigantic, shoulders to stand on, and he hands that baton to young people to continue the good work. So in closing, over to you, Grant. Thank you for creating this platform as a secretariat and for leading the secretariat as well. And I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucia. It's great to see you and great to see the great work that young people are doing. I think it's very clear that we don't have to look for solutions anywhere. The solutions are with young people. And thank you so much for all those that made their inputs into this process. And we will make sure that these inputs are not lost, but that they will all lodged into our learning platform that we do have. And I do encourage you to really get into that space, because there's a lot of materials that actually you can use, including the research work that Louise shared. You're going to find it there. But it was really great time to hear all the key issues that you have raised. I think beyond the general issues that the shrinking of spaces and all the other issues that you have raised, one of the key issues that GCE is really trying to address is the issue of meaningful engagement of young people and students. This is something that we really want to define, and we really want to show the world. What does that mean, to do that? This is not necessarily a consultation on the side, but really bringing young people into the key policy spaces. And this is something that GCE is really trying to do. And we have geared everything of us, including the resources, to ensure that we are able to support young people in order to do that. And I was very excited to see some of the fruits of those investments here, some of the reports that you have been able to share. So all of those things will also ensure that they are shared during the World Assembly. I've said to Vicky and to some of you to say that the GCE will be hosting its major World Assembly from the 22nd to the 24th of November. And this will be also a great space for young people and students to really advocate for the true engagement, meaningful engagement of young people and students within the GCE spaces. It will be a very important space, and we have dedicated resources to ensure that young people, you are also part of that process. And I can't wait. I can't wait to see how young people, you are going to engage and take advantage of that space. We do have a lot of learning events that we do organize, and I would really implore on you to be part of those processes. As Louise has indicated, there's so many research work that is happening. We want you to be part of that process. No longer a side discussion, but we want you to be in the main, because we have heard it for ourselves that the solutions are nowhere else. You do have the solutions with yourself. So looking forward to engaging with you, and thank you so much for being part of this process. As GCE, we are truly committed from our resources to everything to support the work of young people, because we want to show the world what true youth engagement really means. And I hope we are on the mark on that. So thank you so much, and looking forward to your attendance at the World Assembly to continue these discussions and this engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grant. I think, it's always insightful hearing from the senior leadership of these organizations. I just want to check in if Vicky is here to say the final goodbyes. And also thank you to Vicky and thank you to
Thank you,
it's very
Lucia.
discussions around. Thank you, Vicky.
Sure. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you so much to everyone for taking 2 hours of your day to spend with us to speak about solutions, youth-led solutions to the right to education. As Grant mentioned, it's really about meaningful engagement, and the solutions are here within this space and within youth and student organizing. So I really encourage you to continue to engage with GCE online. We have, multiple learning, knowledge exchange, collaboration, activities and programs that are geared towards facilitating, ensuring that youth and students are at the forefront of policy and advocacy and decision making, and that young people really build their education and their future. The hashtag for today was Our Education, Our Future. So let's really continue to push that agenda and to engage on social media as well. I'll share GCE social media handles after this. And I really look forward to continuing the conversation. Before everyone leaves, I just want to take a quick screenshot photo to prove that we're all here. So if you can please turn on your video if you're able, please do, and we'll take a quick video before we say goodbye. Quick photo. Okay, are we all here? You can wave or smile or thumbs up. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you once again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice seeing you again.
Thank you. Bye.